In the 93 years of my life, depressions have come and gone. Prosperity has always returned and will again.
In 1911, the United States government thought it had won. After years of legal battles, the Supreme Court ordered the breakup of the most powerful monopoly the world had ever seen. 34 companies, split apart, scattered. The empire of John D. Rockefeller, a man who had controlled up to 95% of America's oil refining, was officially finished. There was just one problem. When Rockefeller heard the news, he was on a golf course. He barely blinked. He turned to his playing partners and said, "Buy Standard Oil stock," because he understood something the government had completely missed. Breaking up his empire didn't destroy his fortune. It multiplied it. In the 2 years after the breakup, his personal wealth exploded, eventually making him the richest private citizen in the history of the modern world. Equivalent to over $400 billion in today's money, the government's attempt to destroy him had accidentally made him America's first billionaire. This is the story of how John D. Rockefeller built an empire, lost it, and became even richer because of it, and how the companies he created still shape the global economy today. To understand how Rockefeller did what he did, you have to understand where he came from. Because the man was shaped by two completely opposite forces. His father, William, known around town as Devil Bill, was a traveling con man. He sold fake miracle cures from a wagon, was accused of horse theft, and had a second secret family on the side. But he also taught his son something valuable: how to keep meticulous financial records, and how to always get the better of a deal. His mother, Eliza, was the opposite. Deeply religious, fiercely disciplined, relentlessly frugal. She was the anchor in a chaotic household. The result of that combination, a father's cunning and a mother's iron discipline, was John D. Rockefeller. A man who could be utterly ruthless in business and utterly methodical in everything else. He got his first job at 16 as an assistant bookkeeper. Within 3 months, he'd spotted an error in the company's accounts that saved them hundreds of dollars. This wasn't just competence, it was obsession. He believed that numbers revealed the truth about everything, and he was about to apply that belief to an industry that had none. The American oil industry in the mid-1800s was basically the Wild West, except everyone was covered in crude. Wildcatters drilled holes in the ground hoping to strike it rich. Most didn't. The ones who did would flood the market with oil, crashing prices overnight. Then the wells would dry up, prices would spike, and everyone would chase the next boom somewhere else. Endless cycle. Pure chaos, no predictability, no stability, no real money to be made consistently. Rockefeller watched all of this from Cleveland, Ohio, and he saw something most people missed. The real money wasn't in the ground. Drilling for oil was a gamble. You might hit something, you might not. But refining, turning raw crude into the clean burning kerosene that was starting to light up American homes, that was the bottleneck. That was the point of control. Whoever owned refining, owned the industry. In 1870, he and his partners incorporated a new company with a deliberately calm, reassuring name: the Standard Oil Company. In an industry known for chaos and inconsistency, the name was a promise: uniform quality, reliable product. A standard. It was the first move in what would become the most aggressive corporate takeover in American history. Here's where it gets genuinely clever and genuinely ruthless. Rockefeller figured out that the company that could move oil the cheapest could sell oil the cheapest. And in the 1870s, moving anything meant the railroads. So he went to the railroads and made them a proposition. I'll give you guaranteed, massive, consistent volume more than any other shipper. In exchange, I want secret rebates. For every barrel Standard Oil ships, you pay me back a portion of the fee. That alone would have been enough. But he went further. He also negotiated something called drawbacks. For every barrel his competitors shipped on those same railroads, his rivals, not him, the railroad, would pay Standard Oil a cut, a cash payment, just for existing. The railroads had become his private collection agency, taking money from his enemies and routing it directly into his pocket. Competition wasn't just harder, it was mathematically impossible. Armed with his railroad deals, Rockefeller came back to Cleveland in 1872 with a simple message for every other refiner in the city. He showed them his shipping costs. Then he showed them theirs. The numbers didn't lie, they couldn't compete. Some tried, anyway. Rockefeller was patient and methodical about it. He'd sell kerosene below cost in markets where he faced competition, deliberately bleeding rivals dry, while charging premium prices everywhere else. He employed spies to track competitor movements. He cut off their credit lines through backroom deals with suppliers. In 6 weeks, 22 of his 26 Cleveland competitors had sold out to Standard Oil, but owning companies in different states created a legal problem at the time. A corporation in one state couldn't legally own stock in a company in another. So Rockefeller's lawyers invented something new: the trust. In 1882, the Standard Oil Trust was formed. Shareholders of around 40 different oil companies handed their stock to a board of 9 trustees, with Rockefeller at the center. On paper, each company was independent. In reality, a single board controlled everything. One brain, one strategy, one agenda. The octopus was born. At its height, Standard Oil controlled up to 95% of America's refining capacity. It was a machine of almost terrifying efficiency. Rockefeller was obsessed with waste. He once questioned why 40 drops of solder were used to seal a kerosene can when 39 would do the job. He tested it, confirmed it worked, changed the spec, and saved millions of drops of solder across millions of cans. That's the level of detail he operated at. While other companies were literally dumping gasoline, a useless byproduct at the time, into rivers, Standard Oil found ways to use it. Every piece of waste became a product. Tar for roads, paraffin, wax for candles. A byproduct called petroleum jelly that became the consumer product, Vaseline. And here's the weird paradox at the center of this story. Rockefeller was destroying competition, yes. But his obsessive efficiency was also dramatically lowering the price of kerosene. He was making light affordable for millions of ordinary American households who previously couldn't afford it. A ruthless monopolist who was also unintentionally a public benefactor. It didn't matter. The public was starting to see only the monster. In 1902, a journalist named Ida Tarbell started publishing a 19-part investigative series in McClure's magazine. She called it The History of the Standard Oil Company. This wasn't opinion or rhetoric. It was meticulous, documented, devastating. She had receipts. She exposed the secret railroad deals, the drawbacks, the predatory pricing, the spies. She gave the American public a name for what they'd been feeling: the robber baron. Her motivation was personal. Her father had been an independent oilman who'd been financially destroyed by Rockefeller's tactics. She spent years on the investigation, and when it landed hard. It reached the desk of President Theodore Roosevelt, who was already looking for a fight with the trusts. Fueled by public outrage and Tarbell's reporting, the Department of Justice sued Standard Oil in 1906 under the Sherman Antitrust Act. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court. On the 15th of May 1911, the Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil was an unreasonable monopoly in violation of antitrust law. The company was to be broken up into 34 separate, independent companies. The government had won, except it hadn't. Rockefeller owned shares in all of them. As the largest single shareholder, the breakup didn't strip him of anything. It just divided his assets into 34 pieces. 34 pieces that were now free to compete, to innovate, to grow, without the bureaucratic weight of the mothership dragging them down. They became faster, leaner, more profitable, and as their individual stock prices climbed, so did the value of Rockefeller's combined holdings. His fortune didn't shrink after 1911. It exploded. By 1913, he was worth an estimated $900 million, pushing him past the threshold to become America's first billionaire. The most aggressive antitrust action in American history had made its target richer than he'd ever been. Those 34 companies didn't fade into history. They became the pillars of the global energy industry. Standard Oil of New Jersey became Esso, and eventually Exxon. Standard Oil of New York became Mobil. They'd later merge into ExxonMobil, still one of the largest companies on Earth. Standard Oil of California became Chevron. Standard Oil of Indiana became Amoco, later absorbed into BP. The Ohio Oil Company became Marathon. Many of these baby standards went on to form the Seven Sisters, the group of Western oil giants that dominated global petroleum for decades. They were the companies sitting across the table from OPEC's founders in Baghdad in 1960, the companies that got nationalized and squeezed through the 70s. The empire Rockefeller built was officially broken up in 1911. Its children are still running the world's energy markets today. John D. Rockefeller didn't just build a company. He built a system. He proved that ruthless efficiency, vertical integration, and an obsessive grip on logistics could bring order to even the most chaotic industry. He invented the corporate trust, pioneered the concept of a supply chain, and turned a lawless boom and bust industry into a machine. His fight with the government also set the legal framework for American antitrust law, the rule of reason, Standard, the Supreme Court established in the Standard Oil case is still used today, the same framework being applied right now to the tech giants of Silicon Valley. The paradox of Rockefeller is that almost everything about him contradicts itself. He destroyed competition and lowered prices. He lost his empire and got richer. He was a ruthless robber baron who became one of the greatest philanthropists in history, funding universities, medical research, and public health through the Rockefeller Foundation that still operates today. At his peak, he was worth the equivalent of over $400 billion in today's money. No individual in modern history has come close. He tamed chaos, and in doing so, he created the blueprint for the modern corporation, a blueprint that every major company on Earth still follows. If this kind of story is what you're here for, the hidden systems that shape the world we live in, subscribe to Stag Research. This is exactly what we do.